Well, I'd like to welcome you all on behalf of Common Knowledge to what I think is a groundbreaking conference, one in which the people of a nation interrogate what their national governments did during the time of COVID in March 2020, possibly before then and certainly after then. Now, this conference has in many ways been prompted by the official Scottish Covid19 Inquiry. Here's the website for that inquiry, and it is a rather typical government-led inquiry into what they did in 2020. And it's very notable that a major assumption made at that inquiry, which is never questioned, is that there was a novel deadly respiratory disease present in Scotland in 2020, and they called it COVID-19. And if you listen to the public inquiry, then they're using the terms all the time, pandemic, they're using the terms virus, and they're assuming that all of these things are actually present. And that the presence of these justified an unprecedented set of public health measures, including locking down and preventing people actually seeing one another during that time. Effectively, what they're doing is marking their own homework. And what they want to do is to report back to ministers, okay, we did these things, of course it was justified, but we need to learn a few lessons. And that's, I think, is all that's going to come out of that inquiry. But what has actually happened is that very brave people have stood up and they've said, this is what happened to me as a consequence of the measures that you took. And that has been very well publicized by Biology Phenom, his Substack. And it's emerged just what levels of damage were caused. So that's why we want this Scottish People's Inquiry. So it's the people looking at their government and asking the people, asking the government what they did, why did they do it, what was the justification for it, and telling them about all of the damage that they did to their own people. So what I want to look, kind of major questions I want to have a look at during this conference are, was there actually an evidence for any novel deadly respiratory disease in Scotland in March 2020, as they said there was? Was the information given to the Scottish public actually valid? Was it accurate? And lastly, were the government actions which they took appropriate, justified, ethical, or harmful? So those are the questions that I think I would like those things to be addressed during this conference. Now, we've got a list of speakers who will present, and they'll present 15-minute talks, and then we will have 10 minutes after that for you to make your contribution, to ask questions of those speakers, perhaps have a little anecdote that might help to illuminate what was going on. So these people come from different backgrounds, and they have different ways of looking at what happened in COVID-20 2020 in the year March 2020 and onwards. So their views are their views, and my views are my views, and it's up to you to make up your own mind about what you think about those people's views. So we're not kind of telling you this is what you must think. We're telling you what happened as we see it, and you make up your own mind about it. So we'll have 15 minutes. There will be a system of traffic lights for the speakers. So speakers, note that there's 2 minutes to go if you see this, and you're off when you see this, okay? And so the speakers that we have, Dr. Alan Mordew comes from the area of public health. Professor Diana Rasmussen comes from the area of media. I come from, I don't know where I come from. Then we will have evidence from the official inquiry, and Professor Martin Neal will have a look at the outcome of what all of these actions taken by the Scottish Government did in terms of the death statistics. And we'll be concentrating in this morning's session really on care homes and what happened in hospitals. In the afternoon, we'll be talking about the medical intervention which was imposed on the Scottish people by their government, the so-called vaccine, and we're going to be having a look at the ethics of that with Liz Evans, and Claire Craig will then talk about the evidence of harms from the vaccine rollout. And at the end, we want to have a session where I hope you can contribute. We would like to take these people who've done these things to make them accountable. So we would like to have a session in which we think about, what questions would we like to ask of the Scottish Government? To whom should we address these questions? And how can we best coordinate our efforts to hold those responsible to account? So that's what I'd like to have as an outcome of the conference. It's really nice to come and meet people and swap ideas and swap stories, but it's even better if you can make a conference where there's an outcome, and we'd like to have a real outcome, and we'd really like your input to that. So that's the last part of the conference. Okay, so what I would like to address is, first of all, I'm going to address the assumption that the official inquiry makes that, yes, their measures were justified because there was some novel, deadly respiratory disease, COVID-19, present in Scotland in March 2020, and therefore all of the measures that they took in response were absolutely justified. So just to let me go through a few simple things. I don't want to go into great scientific detail. I just want a common sense view of these things. First of all, I go to the NHS website and I find out, okay, what is this disease that you call COVID-19? What are its symptoms? And there are symptoms, and at the end, the NHS says the symptoms are very similar to symptoms of other illnesses such as colds and flu. Well, well, well. Oh, but you say, yeah, COVID-19 does exist. We've got a diagnostic test for it. Yes. So what does a diagnostic test actually do? We've got PCR tests, we've got lateral flow tests, and they detect the presence of molecules, RNA or proteins. Unfortunately, there's no one-to-one correspondence between the detection of these proteins or these RNAs and the presence of a respiratory disease. So perfectly healthy people without a respiratory disease can test positive for this. So you can't say this is a diagnostic test. It's ridiculous. It's testing for the presence of some molecules. And there is actually no demonstrated causal relationship between these molecules which are being detected and a respiratory disease. When people have attempted to test people or inflict them with these molecules, then they don't actually get any disease. So, as in the words of Jason Leach, the clinical director, the tests are a bit rubbish. Okay, so lastly, well, suppose there was a disease, okay, but was it actually deadly? Well, it was declared in January 2020, it was declared a high-consequence infectious disease, but shortly before all the restrictions were imposed on the Scottish people, it was downgraded, no longer a high-consequence infectious disease. And all 4 nations in the UK agreed upon that. And when people have attempted to measure how serious this was, then the figures that they come up with, which could be disputed, is that the seriousness of this disease is comparable to or less deadly than influenza and doesn't affect children. So my conclusion from all this is that the evidence to support the presence of a novel, deadly respiratory disease in Scotland in March 2020 was, at best, very weak. And my conclusion, and that's my opinion, is that the imposition of unprecedented restrictions on the rights and freedoms of Scottish public does not appear justified on this basis. Just one more thing. I know that people say, oh yeah, but I had it. I believe COVID exists because I've had all the symptoms. I'd just like to use this quote from Jerome K. Jerome, who wrote 3 Men in a Boat. It's the most extraordinary thing, but I never read a patent medicine advertisement without being impelled to the conclusion that I am suffering from the particular disease therein dealt with, in its most virulent form. The diagnosis seems in every case to correspond exactly with all the sensations I have ever felt. Okay, so that's my piece.